Hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk about Cuphead, and more specifically a few completely real controversies related to Cuphead that definitely happened and matter. But first of all, what is Cuphead? Well, it's a video game, a rather good video game in my opinion. It's a side-scrolling run-and-gun game in which players control the titular Cuphead with his pal Mugman in co-op mode. Now, Cuphead and Mugman are both in trouble after finding themselves on the wrong side of the tracks and losing at dice in the Devil's Casino. Indebted to the devil, the duo have to track down the devil's runaway debtors and collect their soul contracts for him. It's a pretty neat game, and I'd recommend playing it if you haven't. It has a reputation for difficulty, apparently, but I beat it fairly easily, to be honest, and it didn't even take me that long, either. But then again, I am brilliant at the computer games, and thus have earned the right to talk about them. So given that I'm not a game review channel, you might be wondering, why am I talking about Cuphead? And that's because Cuphead is racist, ableist, and out-of-touch elitist games journalists all hate it because it's too difficult.
You know, Cuphead is racist! That game it's animation style, it's based around those racist cartoons from the 1930s and 40s, so clearly the game is the embodiment of racism! Oh, I can one-up that. It's actually ableist. That's right, it's ableism, and it's just in its most concentrated form, in a form of interactive entertainment, and then I had to go and just shut this shit off and take a couple steps away from my social media feed, because no matter where I went, every single fucking corner of the internet was caked with shit sticking to a wall so fucking bad that even the flies decided, you know what, I can go elsewhere. This is the kind of stuff that I was seeing all the time, based around Cuphead.
That's a ranty chap called AlphaOmegaSin telling his 500,000 subscribers about the hatred Cuphead is apparently receiving all the time in every single corner of the internet. And he certainly seems rather worked up about it, so I'm sure it is actually happening. But I have to ask, for the sake of argument, who is it who is actually attacking Cuphead? Who are these scoundrels?
And this is a game that I got to play and I enjoyed the living fuck out of, yet now due to the game's difficulty, because it's actually a challenging game, not fucking impossible, an actual challenging game, they think that, that's ableist! And they think because of the art style that it is racist. Literally just haphazardly applying fucking labels wherever they see fit. And this is gamers and journalists that are saying this kind of shit. You've gotta be fucking kidding me that this is what's happening. A game does not deserve this kind of bullshit, yet it's happening anyway.
It's happening anyway, apparently. So it's fake gamers and air quotes journalists who've been attacking Cuphead then. Now, Mr. AlphaOmegaSin rants for a solid 16 minutes in much the same vein as what you've seen, but at no point actually identifies who it is specifically he's shouting about. He does a lot of impressions of imaginary silly people calling Cuphead racist and refers to a nebulous they a lot of times, but never actually calls out anyone in particular. And that makes the comments under his video rather confusing. Here's a few examples. Alex Barranco says, "I'm gonna say this and I don't give a flip what anyone thinks. These buffoons claiming Cuphead is racist and ableist are proof that the world has people that should be euthanized. If my opinion hurts anyone's feelings, I say, forget your feelings." Bot Smokey says, "SJWs are cancer, kill them with fire." Ty says, "Holy shit, really? These SJW knows no bounds. Sometimes I just wish they would nuke the world back into the dark ages and we could just start over. SJW would not last long in that kind of world. Fucking Christ." And Lilith, aka the Firehawk, says, "Fuck SJWs. I have epilepsy and I just beat Borderlands 2 yesterday. Hell, I dare these people to say to me Cuphead is ableism. I might just lose control around these people." These people. And this is something you see over and over again in these comments. These people, these people, these people. Dude, I didn't know until I saw this video that people were saying this shit. I totally agree with you, Alpha. these people are dumb. And like, who are they all talking about? You know, who are these people? How did this happen? How is it that this guy can whip up his audience into such a rage that they're wishing for every sort of violence up to and including nuclear annihilation directed at a completely undefined enemy? Is it me, or is that rather odd? So what we're going to do today is try to figure out how Cuphead became the latest battlefield for capital G gamers on one side and, quote, these people on the other. And along the way, we'll see if we can find any examples of these people and see what, if anything, they've actually said about Cuphead. So to start off here, back in August at the Gamescom event in Germany, a VentureBeat writer named Dean Takahashi played a preview version of Cuphead in order to write an article about it. The footage of his attempt was uploaded to VentureBeat's YouTube channel, and his below-average gameplay garnered some attention, shall we say. Now, Takahashi's article acknowledges his poor performance, starting out, "I suck at Cuphead, let's get this out of the way," and later saying, "Go ahead, laugh your heart out at my expense. While my performance on the captured video below is quite shameful as I never finished the level, I think it shows quite well why Cuphead is fun and why making hard games that depend on skill is like a lost art." So, you know, what happened here? A dude was bad at a video game for half an hour. He blames his own poor play, not the game. He calls it fun. He's self-deprecatingly good-natured about it, you know, posting the video online because it's funny that he sucks at the game. And he's also not reviewing the game, by the way. He just previewed it for a bit at a games expo. A different journalist at VentureBeat wrote the actual review of Cuphead on the site, giving it a score of 85 out of 100 and saying, "These days, beating a game sometimes doesn't feel like much of an actual achievement, but I was happy and proud when I killed the last boss in Cuphead. The fact that it was so hard made it so rewarding." And Dean Takahashi later posted a short video of him playing and beating the level that he had earlier struggled with, so well done to Dean for improving, I guess. So why is this all a thing? Well, about that attention I mentioned earlier, lots of folks reacted rather poorly to some guy being bad at a video game. For example, air quotes journalist Ian Miles Prower Chong got some ants in his pants about the situation, saying, "Games journalists are incredibly bad at video games. It's painful to watch this. How do they think they're qualified to write about games? How can a paid professional games journalist be this bad at video games? Dean Takahashi spent 26 minutes playing the first level and never got past the starting area. I don't know how it's possible to rely on the recommendations of game journalists when they don't even have basic reflexes needed to play. It explains why they're all enamored with walking simulators. No skill necessary, just press W and the game will take care of itself," and so on and so forth. So that's quite the extrapolation there. Dean Takahashi, the singular person being bad at Cuphead for a bit at a games expo, is now all games journalists being terrible at all games all the time and engaging in some conspiracy to promote walking simulators or something. All this despite Takahashi's preview of the game and the later actual review on the site both praising Cuphead's difficulty. Chong's take was popular, though, with more than 12,000 people sharing his tweet mocking Takahashi's gameplay and detached theorizing about walking simulators. And so begins the curse of the numbers. The VentureBeat video received over 1 million views. PewDiePie put out a video where he reacts rather obnoxiously to that video, which has over 6 million views at the time of writing this, and another one that has over 4 million. Some channel called Rags put out the Cuphead Chronicles Gamers vs. Journalists, mocking Takahashi's gameplay to a couple of 100,000 viewers. So Cuphead is the hot topic to argue about, so we keep talking about it until it doesn't get us attention anymore. That's how YouTube works, folks. And not to skip ahead too much, but if nobody is actually saying anything worthwhile creating a ranty response to, for example, if nobody is calling Cuphead racist, you can just pretend they are, and your audience will believe you anyway. But let's get back on track. So on October 29th, Ian Miles Chong shared an article on a site called Super Nerdland written by Twitter user Cheeky Scrump, and that's called Postmortem, The Dark Souls of Games Reviews. And when Cheeky Scrump posted this article to Twitter, they added, Why are games journalists so dead set on attacking difficult games? Because it benefits them. But is it true that games journalists are dead set on attacking difficult games like Cuphead? Well, I don't know about that, to be honest. Cuphead has an 88 on Metacritic for a start. It got 5 stars on Giant Bomb, 8.5 on Polygon, 8 out of 10 on GameSpot, and so on. And all these reviews praise the difficulty level. Games journalists love Cuphead and its difficulty, going by what they actually, say about it. So who are the games journalists who are apparently dead set on attacking difficult games? Who are they? Are they more of these people? Well, let's read this article by Cheeky Scrump and see if we can find out. And I quote, "Most recently, Cuphead, the much-hyped run-and-gun platformer with a Golden Age-era cartoon aesthetic, was described as somewhere between Mario and Dark Souls by now infamous games journalist Dean Takahashi. Cuphead and its like have created unexpected controversies about whether or not games journalists should have basic ability when it comes to playing games. The long and short of it is that Cuphead has become a jumping-off point for a full-scale attack on difficult and exclusionary games by the gaming press. As the argument goes, games that are difficult rob lesser skilled players of the chance to complete them, therefore making them exclusionary." Now, if we click on that link there, we're taken to a Polygon article written by Ben Kuchera entitled, "When is exclusion a valid design choice?" So, is this it? Have we found it finally? Is this the full-scale attack by games journalists dead set on attacking difficult games? Well, no. Cheeky Scrump is being rather misleading about the content of this Polygon article in a way that, in my opinion, perfectly illustrates how a lot of people online simply don't know how to read properly. So let's take a look at this Polygon article and how it's written. It starts out with the headline, which is a question, when is exclusion a valid design choice? And it proposes another in its first paragraph, are you owed the act of finishing a game because you bought it? Now this article is an attempt to answer those questions, and it presents multiple viewpoints. As an example, it at one point states, the difficulty will turn some people off and those people never get to see that art, they will never get to enjoy those animations. The design of the game itself keeps them out, when the addition of an easy mode or option to skip the bosses would allow everyone to see as much or as little as they want. So why are so many people against this idea? And following that, it offers an opposing argument. And yet the difficulty is part of the experience of playing Cuphead. Difficult games create an emotional reaction in the player, and that reaction might be the point of the difficulty. So if a game is designed to be played in a very particular way, and Cuphead asks you to treat failure as a chance to learn and rewards repetition and memorization, aren't you subverting those goals by asking for a mode that removes that method of play? I hope you're able to see my point here. This article is discussing something. It proposes a question, then shows multiple viewpoints and presents arguments for each. This article isn't attacking Cuphead or difficult games in general, it's just discussing an issue related to them. So how would one misread this article? Well, you'd see the title, which has the word exclusion in it, and then you'd just smash that into your pre-existing idea of what games journalists want and think, and come to the conclusion that the point of the article was that Cuphead is ableist trash, and the developers should only make walking simulators about lesbians from now on. Obviously. It's silly, but it genuinely is how a lot of folks appear to read, seeing the headline and then just imagining the rest of the text. For another example of someone playing the headline guessing game, let's return to Ian Miles Chong, who on November 12th posted the following tweet, "Here come the attacks on Cuphead and how it's racist." And he shows pictures of 2 articles. He doesn't link to them, obviously, he just shows screenshots of the headlines, because after all, that's all you need. So then, Cuphead is not just ableist, it's also racist, apparently. Now the first article is from a site called Kotaku, and is entitled, "It's impossible to separate Cuphead from the era that inspired it," which is itself mainly just sharing the article in the second image, which is Cuphead and the racist spectre of Fleischer animation? I'm going to go with Fleischer. That's written by Youssef Cole from the website Unwinnable. And that's an interesting article, which I'll link in the description. I'd encourage you to take a look at it, but for now, of note here is that neither of these articles actually call Cuphead racist. They say that its animation is a recreation of an early 20th century animation style that was, at the time, frequently very racist, and they go on to discuss the implications and the meaning of that. Now, first of all, it's odd that Ian Miles Chong would say, "Here come the attacks on Cuphead and how it's racist," considering that concerns about its animation style had been raised as early as 2014, with one journalist in particular stating that Cuphead's character designs seem like callbacks to some really problematic racial caricatures from the 1930s. Not sure what to think of them. That journalist there being Ian Miles Chong. Twitter user Zach Smith responded, "Disagree completely. Why do people overanalyze everything?" To which Ian responds, "Because it's important to look at the world with a critical eye." That was before the ant colony decided to nest in his head, I guess. So is 2014 Ian Miles Chong correct? Well, I decided to do a little investigating and watched a bunch of old animations from the time. Now, fair warning here, I'm about to show some very racist stuff. I mean, some of this shit is just absolutely dreadful. Now, okay, a lot of people back then were super racist, and so was their entertainment. We know that. And if the animation style was all that linked Cuphead to these cartoons, I consider this kind of a stretch. But honestly, the animation is only one part of it. Cuphead shares a lot of other similarities with these cartoons, and some of them are rather awkward. So let's take a look at a few of these similarities. First of all, Cuphead and Mugman are gamblers who, tempted by easy riches, play dice with the devil and then have to be punished. And this gambling motif comes up time and time again in relation to the crude African American caricatures in these cartoons from the period. For example, All This and Rabbit Stew features Bugs Bunny using a pair of dice to hypnotize a rabbit hunter.
Now, wait a minute, Doc. Relax. Now, hold it a minute. What y'all got there, man? It couldn't be a pair of them.
And this is something that's repeated in the cartoon Angel Puss. A supposedly comedic cartoon version of Uncle Tom's Bungalow ends with the titular character purchasing his freedom. And how could he afford to do that? Well, he got rich with a pair of loaded dice, obviously. The cartoon Clean Pastures has a group of angels trying to entice the residents of cartoon Harlem to go to Paradise. Paradise. Get it? It's like paradise. And a cartoon called Coal Black and the Seven Dwarves, get it, has this guy with dice for teeth. What is it with the dice? Anyway, the cartoon I watched that was most relevant to Cuphead here is Sunday Go to Meetin' Time, which besides being fucking racist as balls, obviously, features a story that is pretty close to the one in Cuphead. In that cartoon, various caricatured black people are heading to a church. Oh god. All except the main character, who's playing dice, if you can believe it, behind a fence, before being admonished by a different racist stereotype. Later slipping out of church to steal chickens. The character's hit on the head and experiences a vision of being sent to hell to answer for his various crimes, including playing dice, obviously, and stealing watermelons. Fucking hell. The main character then meets the devil, who sings a song.
Oh, you got to give the devil his due. You got to give the devil his due. Up on earth you always had your way. Drank your gin and slept your life away. Now just for that you're gonna have to pay, 'cause you got to give the devil his due.
Now, if you're watching this and you've played Cuphead, you'll have noticed many similarities here. It's not just the animation.
Mr. King Dice, he just what I say. The devil has his price, and I'll make sure you pay.
You see, what the Cuphead developers have done is watched these cartoons and said, well, we love the music, the dice, the main characters being punished for irresponsible gambling, the cartoon devil, the way the cartoon devil leans in like that, his eye gets all big. You know, all these trappings that were designed and utilised at the time to mock black people. We love all them, we just don't like the caricatures themselves, so we'll swap out the stereotype for a little cartoon cup man instead, and we're good to go. Speaking to Kotaku, game designer Chad Moldenhauer said, "We went into the game knowing that what we wanted from the era was the technical, artistic merit, while leaving all the garbage behind. But to what extent can that be done? You know, is it possible to fully extract the caricature from the environment, I guess is the question. Now, to be fair, these cartoons are only a part of Cuphead's design influences. There's some Tom and Jerry in there, some Popeye, Betty Boop, and so on. But the racist cartoons had their influence too. The guy with the dice for a head singing that the devil has his price, he could have stepped right out of one of these cartoons, and that's, well, I don't know, it's worthy of a conversation, isn't it? You know, for someone with knowledge of these racist cartoons to play Cuphead and be reminded of them and made to feel uncomfortable, well, that's a perfectly legitimate reaction, honestly, and I'm certainly not going to argue with those people. Again, I'm not attacking Cuphead here. I like Cuphead. I'm just talking about it. And I feel the need to reiterate that right now because of something else I saw on Twitter. Video game designer Mark Kern is one of the people on the making up things about games journalists to justify hating them bandwagon, and he's tweeted a whole bunch of times about how everyone is calling Cuphead racist. And apparently he was getting called out for that, because on November 12th he posted the following sarcastic tweet. "Yes, nobody is saying Cuphead is racist. I'm making it all up." And let's take a look at the picture he's responding to, which is apparently evidence for him not making it all up, and it's from a Twitter conversation which reads like this. Peter L. Newton says, "I'm not personally upset by this game, but the developers can't be naive about the origins of their art style either. They know when it's from and what happened then. Downplaying it is what I find disrespectful." Stephen Whittle then responds, "This is an issue I have when teaching. Students who ignore context of what they use/appropriate and don't understand that ignoring a problematic meaning doesn't make it go away. My games don't have a message doesn't fly, especially with regards to procedural rhetoric. That being said, I'm uncertain how they could have used those motifs without it being problematic in some way or another." Then Kay Sheely adds, "The thing that bothers me is not the art style itself, but that the developers said they're not even interested in talking about its history, which feels irresponsible to me." Now then, none of these people were attacking Cuphead right here. They weren't calling for it to be banned, or saying the developers are terrible people, or that you're racist if you like Cuphead, or any other ridiculous, extrapolated nonsense. They're just talking about the game and its design elements and its development, and that's all. That someone like Mark Kern can read this discussion and have Cuphead is racist be his only takeaway from it is really disappointing. I'm of the opinion that art is anything that people treat like art, and we, as gamers, should be willing to at least entertain these sorts of discussions, even if we disagree. It's not hurting anyone, is it, to have this conversation? The real divide here isn't between gamers and games journalists, it's between people who are prepared to have conversations about gaming as if it's a real art form deserving of thoughtful criticism, and people who mistake that criticism for insult and overreact to it. To certain folks, though, this polite conversation about Cuphead's art style will always read as an outraged accusation of racism, and this balanced discussion about difficulty levels will be read as an outraged accusation of ableism. And I'm not sure there's anything I could say here to get them to take a more nuanced look, really. It's in their financial interest to imagine outrage in order to be outraged about it. And to loop back around to our pal AlphaOmegaSin for a second, a little sketch he performs in his video illustrates the hypocrisy of this pretty nicely.
I would love to see these motherfuckers somehow sit at a table with people that are actually dying of illness, and tried to explain to them, oh man, well, I see that you've only got mere weeks to live because, well, what you're currently dealing with is incurable. But I was playing Cuphead. You know, I'm really sorry that your family's off in a separate room and they're crying their eyes out and they don't know what to do because you were actually the breadwinner of the family, and unfortunately, they aren't going to be able to make ends meet, and they're going to have somebody that is kind of the glue of the family is going to end up having to leave them, but Cuphead's really difficult.
So he imagines one of these people going up to someone with a terminal illness and complaining about Cuphead's difficulty to, I suppose, illustrate the relative triviality of that complaint. What he doesn't somehow see is how easily he and his complaints can be inserted into that same sketch. Imagine going up to someone with a terminal illness and saying, sorry, I know you're about to die and your family's sad because you're the breadwinner and everything, but some people call the video game ableist. That's what I'm choosing to spend my time being outraged about. And before wrapping up here, I'd like to highlight this tweet from Cheeky Scrump, the author of the earlier article shared by Ian Miles Chong. And I quote, "The rich kid who used to laugh at you for wearing a Mario t-shirt in high school now rents a $2 million apartment in San Francisco where they pretend to be poor and write about how they're a real fan of video games, not these toxic gamers." Now, this is obviously a very silly point, but it does expose the thinking behind a part of the gamer side of the gamer-games journalist divide. I've spoken previously about how self-identified gamers have attempted to adopt the language of oppressed groups. Well, what this is right here is an example of gamers clumsily having a go at class concepts, and it reminds me of that amazing Gamergate era image showing the impoverished gamers holding up the rich games journalists and critical theorist social justice warriors, which is just wonderful. Gamers who see games journalists as out-of-touch millionaires ruining games while sipping champagne in their mansions are arguably, in microcosm anyway, carrying out a criticism of capitalism, albeit a deeply flawed one. They're acting as the oppressed workers and have incorrectly positioned journalists, for some reason, as the rich taskmasters. So when Dean Takahashi is shown to be bad at a video game, it's thus a deeply upsetting breach of the natural order. You know, the capital G gamers react to that much like we would all react to finding out a billionaire banker wasn't paying any taxes or something. How outrageous, you know, that's not how things are supposed to work. And their explanation is the standard liberal failing when criticising capitalism. You know, the wrong people are at the top. Fire Dean Takahashi. Get rid of him. And fire any other journalists who supported him. You know, there's no such thing as a systemic problem. It's just that the wrong people are in charge. How did they get the idea that games journalists are in charge of anything? No offense to games journalists here. And how many layers of this metaphor are we on now? I've lost track. Let's try and extract ourselves from it, I think. So what's my overall point here? I don't know anymore, to be honest. Maybe it's gamers should learn a bit more about the world outside gaming. Probably. I feel like a lot of capital G gamers are so threatened by journalism that simply asks questions or sparks debate because they'd rather be totally passive and uncritical consumers of a predictable and unchanging product. And any hint of outside influence possibly interfering with the imagined purity of that product and its creation process is taken as an outraged attack. Or maybe it's simply being reminded of the fact that games even have a creation process at all that's so infuriating for them. You know, games aren't created in a process by artists, they just happen. And we, as gamers, buy them. And games journalists only exist to give every game a high score and provide us with a sense of shared experience and reassurance in our enjoyment of the medium. We don't just want to have fun. We need to be told we're having fun, and anyone theorizing about things possibly being done differently is just ruining the fantasy, really. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Now, any sharp-eyed fans out there will have noticed that in my last video that went out, I said in my next video I was going to be talking about anti-feminist YouTube, and then this video was about Cuphead instead. So what happened there? Well, this video was originally a segment from that video, which is about the practice of making up an imaginary enemy to be outraged about. And as such, you'll have noticed quite a lot of that in this video, you know, gamers making up things about games journalists and all that. But as you can tell from the length, this Cuphead section was getting a bit unwieldy, so I decided to make it its own thing. That video is still in the works. It's probably not going to be my next release, but maybe next month or early in January. January. Wow, this year has really flown by, hasn't it? Time flies when everyone is miserable and only terrible things happen, apparently. Thanks as always to my patrons who should be scrolling by right now, possibly for the last time. There's getting a few too many of them to scroll by in a reasonable time lately, so I think I'm going to have to switch it up. I might do a series of static text boxes. That's something I might try out, or maybe I'll set appearing in the credits as a tier reward or something, I don't know. Having too many patrons to manage is one of those good problems to have though, I guess. So thank you all again, sincerely, and I'll see you next time.